Chapter 7. In the vast expanse of a long-dried ocean lies Shensa, the first of many dry towns. The city is situated in the center of a great alkali plain, bleached by the scorching sun over millions of years. The houses are grand, with multiple rooms and expansive windows. The less fortunate are forced to live in sun-dried brick homes, while the more impressive buildings are carved from the saltstone cliffs that tower over the city. Word travels fast in the dry towns, and if Lyric were in Shensa, he would soon discover my presence and my intentions. I could attempt to disguise myself, but I knew it would be useless. Lyric had created the very disguise that I wore. As the second sun set behind the salt cliffs, I remained in Shensa, waiting for something to happen. I slept in a cramped cubbyhole behind a wine shop, paying a hefty price for the privilege. During the blood-red noon, I paced the public square of Shensa in silence. Days passed, and no one paid attention to a nameless man in a shabby shirt-cloak. Only the children, with their pale hair, noticed my presence, but they showed no fear or curiosity. It dawned on me that Rindy might be similar to these children. On the 5th day, I had become so much a part of the scenery that even the children paid me no mind. A few old men dozed on the stone benches, their faces as worn as their shirt-cloaks. Suddenly, a woman appeared, striding along the flagged walk with a proud, rhythmic gait. Her arms were bound by jeweled bracelets, linked together by a silver-gilt chain. A tiny golden padlock hung from a silken loop at her waist, but the even tinier key in the lock indicated that she was of a higher caste, and her binding was by choice, not command. She approached me with a formal greeting, her arm raised like a man. The chain around her waist tinkled in the quiet square as she pulled her other hand tight against it. She studied me for a moment before I met her gaze. I had expected her to have hair like black glass and eyes that burned like a red star, but her eyes were darker than poison berries, and her mouth was as dangerous as a cutberry. She was young, but her weathered face and eyes had seen worse storms than the ones outside. She didn't flinch at my scars, and met my gaze without hesitation. "You're a stranger. What brings you to Shensa?" she asked directly. I responded with the insolence she demanded, barely moving my lips. "I've come to buy women for the brothels of Ardcaran. Perhaps you would be suitable once washed. Who could arrange for your sale?" She took the rebuke without a flinch, but her mouth twitched with mischief or rage. The battle was on between us, and I knew it would be fought to the end. Something fell from her draperies, but I didn't move. I knew her tricks. She left without retrieving it, and the children had disappeared, leaving their toys behind. The old gaffers on the benches watched me with impassive eyes. I could have asked for her name, but I held back. It would only lessen my prestige. I glanced down at the tiny mirror that had fallen from her fur robe, but I left it for the children to pick up. I had accomplished my first objective. If you can't be inconspicuous, be so conspicuous that no one can miss you. That in itself is a fair concealment. How many people can accurately describe a street riot? I finished my bad meal with worse wine when the chak came in. He disregarded the proprietor and made his way to me. He was furred, immaculately white, with a velvet muzzle contracted as if the smells might soil it. He kept a paw outstretched to ward off accidental contact with anything dirty. His fur was scented, and his collar was embroidered silk. This pampered minion surveyed me with the innocent malice of an uninvolved non-human for merely human intrigues. I was summoned to the great house of Shanitha by a scarred man who spoke in the Shensa dialect with an affected lisp. He led me through the rough dry town to an outlying district where the great house stood. The entry was guarded by 2 great caryatids enwrapped in chains of carved metal. The gilt had long ago worn away from the chains, and the caryatids were patient and blind, their jewel eyes long vanished under a hotter sun than today's. The entrance hall was enormous, and the main hall was even colder than the legendary hell of the Chaks. It was far too big for the people in it. There were 3 men, 2 women, and a child in the room. They were all dry-towners and had an obscure family likeness, and they all wore rich garments of fur dyed in many colors. One of the men, old and stooped and withered, was doing something to the brazier. A slim boy of 14 was sitting cross-legged on a pile of cushions in the corner. There was something wrong with his legs. A girl of 10, in a too-short smock that showed long, spider-thin legs above her low leather boots, was playing with some sort of shimmery crystals, spilling them out into patterns and scooping them up again from the uneven stones of the floor. One of the women was a fat, creased slattern, whose jewels and dyed furs did not disguise her greasy slovenliness. Her hands were unchained, and she was biting into a fruit which dripped red juice down the rich blue fur of her robe. The old man gave her a look like murder as I came in, and she straightened slightly but did not discard the fruit. The room had a distinct air of austere poverty, with the exception of the overweight woman who stood out like a sore thumb. However, it was the man and woman who caught my attention, and I barely registered the others on the periphery. Kirill stood at the foot of the platform, glaring at me. The woman was the same one I had scolded earlier in the public square. Kirill spoke. "So it's you." His voice devoid of any emotion. Not friendly, not hostile, not even hateful. There was only one way to respond. I faced the woman, who sat on a throne-like chair beside the fat woman, and boldly said, "I assume this summons means you informed your family of my offer?" She flushed, and that was enough for me. I held back my triumph, wary of overconfidence. The old man cackled with laughter, and Kirill interjected with a sharp, angry sound, indicating that my remark had been repeated and had lost none of its impact. Only the clenching of his jaw betrayed his anger as he calmly said, "Be quiet, Dalisa. Where did you hear this?" I spoke boldly. "The great house has changed rulers since I last visited the Salt Cliffs. Newcomers do not know my name, and I do not know theirs." The old man spoke thinly to Kirill. "Our name has lost its power. One daughter is lured away by the toy-maker, and another babbles with strangers in the square. A homeless vagrant from the streets does not know our name." My eyes adjusted to the dim light of the brazier, and I saw Kirill biting his lip and scowling. He gestured to a table with glassware, and a white chack silently poured wine. "If you have no blood feud with my family, will you drink with me?" Kirill asked. "I will," I said, relaxing. Even if he had associated me with the scarred Earthman from the spaceport, he seemed to have let it go. He seemed surprised, but waited until I had taken a sip before swiftly knocking the glass from my hand. I stumbled back, wiping my cut lip, and quickly weighed my options. The insult was grave, and could result in death. I had come to settle one feud, not start another. But even as these thoughts raced through my mind, I drew my skein, surprised at the shrillness of my own voice. "You create offense in your own home!" "Spy and traitor!" Kirill bellowed. He didn't draw his skein, but instead grabbed a long, four-thonged whip from the table, making it whistle through the air. The child scurried away, and I took a step back, trying to hide my confusion. I couldn't fathom what had provoked Kirill's attack, but it was clear that I had made a grave error and was fortunate to escape with my life. Kirill's voice quivered with fury. "You have the audacity to enter my home after I tracked you to Igam and back, you blind fool, but now you will pay." His whip sliced through the air, narrowly missing my shoulders. I stepped back as he swung the powerful thongs. It cracked again, and a searing pain shot through my upper arm like red-hot irons. My skein fell from my numb fingers as the whip struck the floor. "Pick up your skein," Kirill demanded. "Pick it up if you dare." He poised the lash again. The fat woman screamed. I stood frozen, weighing my chances of disarming him with a sudden leap. Suddenly the girl Dalisa leaped from her seat with a harsh musical chime of chains. "Kirill, no, no, Kirill!" He shifted slightly, but did not take his eyes off me. "Get back, Dalisa." "No, wait!" She ran to him and caught his whip arm, dragging it down, and spoke to him urgently. Kirill's expression softened as she spoke. He took a deep breath and threw the whip down beside my skein on the floor. "Answer me honestly, or you will die. What are you doing in Shensa?" I could scarcely believe that I was granted a reprieve from being beaten to death at Kirill's feet. The girl returned to her throne-like chair. Now I had to either tell the truth or concoct a convincing lie. I was lost in a game where I didn't know the rules. The explanation that might spare my life could also lead to a painful death. Suddenly I wished Lyric was by my side with a poignancy that was almost painful. But I had to bluff it out alone. If they recognized me as Race Drake, the Trantor spy who had frequently visited Shensa, they might release me. It was possible that they were Trantor sympathizers. On the other hand, Kirill's shouts of spy, renegade, suggested otherwise. I stood, trying to ignore the searing pain in my lashed arm, but I knew that blood was running hot down my shoulder. Finally I said, "I came to settle a blood feud." Kirill's lips curled in what could have been a smile. "You will indeed, but with whom remains to be seen." Knowing that I had nothing to lose, I said, "With a renegade named Lyric Archer." Only the old man echoed my words dully. "Lyric Archer?" I felt encouraged, realizing that I wasn't dead yet. "I swore to kill him." Kyril suddenly clapped his hands and ordered the white chak to clean up the broken glass on the floor. He said huskily, "You are not Lyric Archer?" "I told you he wasn't," Dalisa said, her voice high and hysterical. "I told you he wasn't." A scarred man, tall, what was I to think? Kyril sounded and looked shaken. He poured a glass for me and handed it over, his voice hoarse as he spoke. "I never thought even Lyric would break the code so far as to drink with me." "I know he wouldn't," I replied confidently. The codes of terror had only made a surface impact on Lyric. Deep down, his own world still held sway. If these men were in a blood feud with Lyric, and he stood where I did, he would let himself be beaten to a pulp before tasting their wine. I took the glass, raised it, and drained it. Then, holding it out before me, I said, "Lyric's life is mine, but I swear by the red star, the unmoving mountains, the black snow, and the ghost wind, that I have no quarrel with anyone under this roof." I threw the glass to the floor, where it shattered on the stones. Kyril hesitated, but under the fierce gaze of the girl, he quickly poured himself a glass of wine and drank a few sips before flinging down the glass. He stepped forward and laid his hands on my shoulders. I winced as he touched the welt of the lash and couldn't raise my own arm to complete the ceremonial toast. Kyril stepped away and shrugged. "Shall I have one of the women attend to your injury?" "Do it yourself," snapped Dalisa. "It's nothing," I lied. "But since we're bound by spilled blood under your roof, I demand that you give me any news you have of Lyric, the spy and renegade." "If I knew, would I be under my own roof?" Kyril retorted fiercely. The old man on the dais broke into shrill, whining laughter. "You've drunk with him, Kyril. Now he's bound you not to harm him. I know the story of Lyric. He was a spy for terror for 12 years. 12 years, and then he fought and flung their filthy money in their faces and left them. But his partner was some dry-town half-breed or tranter spy, and they fought with clawed gloves and nearly killed each other, except the tranters, who have no honor, stopped them. See the marks of the Kaifurg on his face." "By Shara the Golden Chained," Kyril said, grinning at me. "You're a clever man, if nothing else. What are you, a spy or a half-caste of some odd-Karen slut?" "It doesn't matter what I am," I replied. "You have a blood feud with Lyric, but mine is older than yours, and his life is mine. As you are bound in honor to kill—" The formal phrases came easily to my tongue. The Earthman had slipped away. "You are also bound in honor to help me kill. If anyone under your roof knows anything of Lyric—" "Lyric works against the son of the ape," Kyril interrupted, using the insulting Coruscant term for the Trantors. "If we help you kill him, we remove a goad from their flanks. I prefer to let the filthy Trantorans spend their strength trying to remove it themselves. Moreover, I believe you are an Earthman yourself. You have no right to the respect I offer to us, the people of the sky. However, you have shared wine with me, and I have no argument with you." He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. "Leave my roof unharmed, and my city with your dignity intact." I couldn't argue or plead. A man's kihar, his personal honor, was a valuable thing in Shensa, and he had placed me in a position where I couldn't compromise it further with words. But if I left at his command, I would lose my kihar just as much as if I were a lower-ranking person dismissed. There was only one desperate option left. "A moment," I said, raising my hand. As he turned halfway, surprised, thinking I was going to compromise my dignity with another plea, I threw it at him. "I will bet Shegri with you." His ironclad composure seemed to waver. I had struck a blow to his belief that I was an Earthman, as it was doubtful that there were even 6 Earthmen on Coruscant who knew about Shegri, the dangerous game of the Dry Towns. It was no ordinary gamble, as the bettor risked his life and possibly his sanity. Rarely would a person bet Shegri unless they had nothing else to lose. It was a cruel, possibly decadent game that had no equivalent in the known universe. but I had no other choice. I had hit a dead end in Shainsa. Lyric could be anywhere on the planet, and half of Magnusson's month had already passed. Unless I could force Kirill to reveal what he knew, I might as well give up. So I repeated, "I will bet Shegri with you." Kirill stood motionless. The Shegrin wagered his bravery and endurance in the face of torture and an unknown fate. On the other hand, the stakes were clearly defined beforehand. But if he lost, his punishment or penalty was at the whim of the one who accepted him, and he could be subjected to any fate the winner decided. And this was the contest. The Shegrin allowed himself to be tortured from sunrise to sunset. If he endured, he won. It was that simple. He could stop the torture at any time with a word, but doing so was a concession of defeat. This was not as dangerous as it initially appeared. The other party to the bet was bound by the ironclad codes of Coruscant to inflict no permanent physical harm, no injury that would not heal within 3 sun courses. But from sunrise to sunset, any torment or painful ingenuity that the half-human mentality of Coruscant could devise had to be endured. The person who could outthink the torture of the moment, the person who could keep in mind the single thought of their goal, that person could claim the stakes they had set, as well as other traditional concessions. The hall grew silent. Dalissa had straightened up and was watching me closely, her lips parted and the tip of a little red tongue visible between her teeth. The only sound was the soft crunching as the fat woman nibbled on nuts and tossed their shells into the brazier. Even the child playing with crystal dice had stopped and stared at me with a gaping mouth. Kirill demanded, "What do you want?" "Tell me everything you know about Lyric Archer and keep my presence in Shainsa a secret," I replied. Kirill exclaimed, "By the red shadow, you are brave, Raskar." "Answer with only yes or no," I commanded. Rebuked, Kirill fell silent. Dalissa leaned forward, and for some inexplicable reason, I thought of a girl with hair like spun black glass. Kirill raised his hand. "I say no. I have a blood feud with Lyric and will not sell his death to another. Furthermore, I believe you are from Trantor, and I will not do business with you. Lastly, you have saved my life twice, and I would find little pleasure in torturing you. I say no. Drink with me again, and we will part without a quarrel." Defeated, I turned to leave. "Wait," said Dalissa. She stood up and walked down from the dais, her chains clanging musically. "I have a quarrel with this man." I almost said that I did not quarrel with women, but stopped myself. The Trantor notion of chivalry had no equivalent on Coruscant. Dalissa looked at me with her dark, poisonous berry eyes, cold and level and amused, and said, "I will bet Shegri with you, unless you fear me, Raskar." Suddenly, I knew that if I lost, I might have been better off trusting Kirill and his whip or the wild beasts of the mountains.